few things. The first thing I'm going to cover is the database administrator. Part of what's new in TV white spaces is that the FCC is using geolocation databases for the first time to help protect incumbents. So we'll talk a little bit about that. There's also obviously going to be an FCC certification procedure for radios that operate in these frequency bands. So we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about when are these solutions going to be available, what kind of technologies are going to be involved. We'll also talk about what new technologies are already being developed that would take advantage of TV white spaces. And then lastly, we'll talk about how TV white spaces is going to become a global opportunity, and we'll talk about what's happening internationally. So the first thing I want to talk about is the database administrators. So as I mentioned, geolocation technology is a big piece of how TV white spaces protects the incumbents. And so the FCC has asked for companies to be database administrators. And 9 different companies have applied, including Spectrum Bridge. And the order that the FCC issued on September 23rd basically gave the Office of Engineering and Test at the FCC the authority to select database administrators. The FCC has publicly said they're going to select multiple vendors, and we expect them to make those selections here in Q4 of 2010, and that'll close out that issue in terms of having database providers ready to go. The next step in the process is really how do I get equipment certified? And the FCC has said certification is going to be a combination of the radio plus the database. The database is required for the radio to know what frequencies are available in any given location. So it's the system working together that actually provides the solution. So the certification is going to be done by the FCC laboratory. They've said that that process could take up to 45 days. They haven't yet released an actual certification test methodology, but that's what we're working on, and that'll get defined over the next couple of months. So given the time involved in selecting a database administrator and the 45 or so days required for the certification procedure, the earliest we think certified equipment could be ready for sale and installation in this marketplace will be sort of late Q1, could stretch into Q2 depending on if there's any unforeseen delays or not. But the good news is, you know, in 6 to 9 months from today, we could have equipment that people could actually purchase and actually install that are FCC certified. So we think that's a pretty good timetable for people to be able to start building network solutions in 2011. So naturally, when you look at that time frame, the next question that comes up is, well, what kind of radio solutions are going to be available? And the answer is the solutions are going to fall into 2 categories and 2 types. The categories are the high power and low power that Peter mentioned earlier in the presentation. So the high power radios are designed to be fixed. They transmit at a maximum of 4 watts CIRP. They're really designed for point-to-point, long-range, multiple kilometer kinds of solutions. And those are the kinds of solutions that Peter talked about in the trials earlier in the presentation. Then the low power category is really for mobile devices, laptops, tablets, cell phones, anything that runs on a battery and can be taken someplace. And here the power limits are lower. They're either 100 milliwatts or 40 milliwatts EIRP, and the power limits are very similar to what you see today in Wi-Fi devices that operate in 2.4 gigahertz and 5 gigahertz. So 2 different solution types, and those will yield 2 different kinds of radios. Now, as far as what technologies are going to make up those radios, the nice thing is in an unlicensed field, we will see a variety of different technologies being used. So we have already seen existing technologies being adapted to be used in TV white spaces. So you'll see things like WiMAX, LTE, and probably some proprietary radio solutions that all work in TV white spaces. In addition to existing technologies that may be adapted to TV white spaces, the industry is already working on new technologies and new standards. So I'll talk a little bit about that. The good news is the industry has been thinking about TV white spaces for quite some time. So there are several standards activities that are either complete are well underway. So I'm going to talk about just 3 of those. There's actually more standards activity happening in the industry than just these 3, but these are probably the most well known. The first one is the ECMA 392 standard. This was developed by a group of companies under the Cognia brand, and they submitted that standard that they developed to ECMA International, which is a European standards body, and the European standards body, ECMA, has adopted that submission, and it's now known as the ECMA 392 standard. That standard is focused on low-power devices, and it's focused on whole-home, high-definition audio and video distribution. The idea was to address some of the limitations that exist in the current Wi-Fi standard and build a standard that can really give you high levels of quality of service for audio, video, high-definition streams, and be able to, use the range of TV white spaces to deliver that throughout a house or a business, as well as provide the typical internet access which Wi-Fi does today. In addition to the ECMA standard, the IEEE has 2 working groups that are working on significant standards in TV white spaces. The first one is 802.22, and this is focused on regional area networks. So this is in the TV white space bands for fixed devices with long range or very large cell sizes. They're looking at 10 kilometers to 100 kilometers in range, and they've been working on that for well over a year, developed, like I said, specifically for regional area networks. There's a sister effort in the IEEE 802.11 working group, specifically 802.11 AF, and this is, of course, local area technology, and this is basically going to extend Wi-Fi to the TV white space bands. So if you're familiar with Wi-Fi originally in 802.11b started off in 2.4 gigahertz, and later there was an 802.11a that adapted Wi-Fi to the 5 gigahertz bands, and this is now the next generation of that. The AF will adapt Wi-Fi to the TV white space bands. So this is focused on a low-power portable device kinds of operation. So in addition to the industry standards efforts, there's also significant international efforts as well. Obviously, everyone is excited about what the FCC has done and what it means here in the U.S., but this becoming a global marketplace success, much like Wi-Fi, will help bring new products and technologies faster. So the good news is there's a lot of work already underway. The United Kingdom, or the UK, probably has the most effort put into TV white spaces. They've been paralleling the FCC effort, and they are very close to approving TV white spaces. In fact, there's some thinking that draft rules from the UK could arrive as early as next month. So that would be very soon thereafter the FCC rule, so that's moving along really well. Similarly, the European Union they've had a study group in their CEPT looking at TV white spaces, and they just released a report last month on their findings to date, and that report is now open for sort of public comment and feedback until the end of November. And then once they have all the feedback, then they'll start looking at how they can accelerate plans in the European Union to adopt TV white spaces. Our neighbors to the north in Canada have been looking at TV white spaces for some time. They obviously cooperate very closely with the FCC, and we think this is something they will pick up shortly and start working on so they can, have cross-border rules and all those kinds of things. There are also some countries in Asia, notably Singapore and South Korea, that are actually in the midst of trying to conduct trials in their countries in TV white spaces, and they're actively looking for industry partners who would like to participate in those trials. Then there's also a couple of countries who have expressed interest in TV white spaces but haven't yet started an active proceeding, which is China and Japan, both of which represent very large markets. Now that the FCC decision happened here at the end of September, our expectation is both China and Japan will start to get more active on this. So the point I want to leave you with here is TV white spaces is well positioned to become a global opportunity with significant efforts happening in the European Union, Asia, and slowly this will become a bigger success, much like Wi-Fi